Chess.com has done it again. They've given me this account called Average Joe with a rating of 358 that I can use for a rating climb. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to be starting at 358, working my way up to probably 2200, explaining the thought process behind every move, every game that's played. You're going to learn a lot. We've got the statistics, the wins, the losses, the draws, the rice. If you don't know what the rice is, keep watching. I'm sure you'll figure it out at some point. We're going to jump right into some games, and let's go ahead and do this. There's going to be timestamps down below so you can jump around to the games that you find most interesting. Let's go ahead. So what's the first thing that we want to do? We want to control the center. We want to develop our pieces quickly. Against the Scandinavian, the simplest and easiest thing to do is to take it, because usually the queen comes out, and we can gain a tempo. So how do we gain a tempo on the queen? Well, hopefully you noticed the move knight to c3. And we can gain a tempo a lot of different ways. We could attack it with a pawn. You could say we could attack it with the queen and gain a tempo, but that gives black the option to trade queens. But by attacking it with the knight, we not only gain the tempo, a free move essentially, but we also develop one of our pieces, which is what we're trying to do, right? And our opponent's playing super quickly, puts us in check. What do we need to do? We can't move our king, so we have to block. How should we block? Well, if we block with the queen, it's just going to potentially lead to a trade. And it also blocks our bishop. This is one of the principles you want to try to follow. Don't block these bishops in early because they need to be developed. And if they get blocked behind other pieces, they're not going to be able to be easily developed. So I think what I'm going to do is play the move bishop to e2 for that reason. Because if I block with the knight, then the bishop's kind of stuck there. Okay, what is our opponent doing? This is a good habit. Whenever your opponent makes a move, you want to ask yourself the question, is there a threat? Are they attacking something? And I think the answer is yes, they're attacking this. Do I care about that? No, I'll just take it. But what about this one, right? This is actually undefended because I've moved my bishop. What am I going to do about this? Now, I think a lot of players at this rating level would play the move maybe g3. You're thinking, all right, let me just block off that queen and not let it get in there. The problem with g3 is twofold. Number one, you're not developing your pieces. Okay, and at the start of the game, it's like a race. It's like who can get their pieces off the back as quickly as possible. And g3 doesn't help me do that. The other thing about g3 is it makes these weaknesses here that I can't really repair. Remember, pawns can never move backwards in chess. So I don't really want to play g3. So I think bishop to f3 would be a good move because it would defend my pawn and also line up over here. Or if you want to be aggressive, you can do a little sacrifice. Now, this is maybe a bit more of an advanced concept, but I'm going to show it to you guys so you can see how it works. What I'm going to do is play knight to f3, fully understanding I'm about to lose a pawn here. Okay, yeah. And why would I do that? Well, for one, I have 3 pieces out. My opponent only has the queen, so that's good. My rook is attacked. So here's kind of the point behind this. I have this follow-up move, rook to g1. And I'm gaining another tempo on the queen. So now I have my rook, which is defended, by the way. I have my rook involved. I have my knight, my other knight, and my bishop all kind of playing a role in the game. Look at all the squares on the board that I'm controlling from these pieces. Look at this. Look at this. This one's controlled. This one's controlled. This one's controlled. Look at all of these squares. These are controlled. I didn't do those. I have lots of control over the board. Okay, so this is fantastic. And I'm going to actually get some more here with d4. Now this bishop's unleashed. And so the control of the board gets even more. Look at all the squares, right? And this is important that you understand that, well, he's moving, so I can't keep highlighting them. But basically it looks like this. Look at all these squares that I'm controlling. And is that good? Is that enough compensation for giving up this pawn? Absolutely. Absolutely. My position is fantastic. So now the only thing is my king. Like, what am I going to do with my king? Because normally you're supposed to castle, but I've sort of messed up my king side. Well, I'm probably going to castle the other way, and that's totally fine. But first, I have to get these pieces out. So I'm going to get the pieces out, but I'm also paying attention to what my opponent did. All right, am I worried about this? Not really. That's defended. I'm not really concerned. I'm looking for tactics, though. So they did line up on my bishop here, so I can move my knight somewhere if I wanted to and unleash the bishop. Now, I don't think I'm going to do that right at this moment because the queen would just take here, but that's something that I'm thinking about. Okay, I think I could also attack the queen, but this rook's already looking pretty good. I think I would rather get another piece into the game that's not doing anything. So I think we need to move this bishop, and maybe bishop f4 looks like a pretty nice square. Okay, so look at this. I've won the race. I've won the race of getting my pieces out quickly. All right, so I'm pretty happy about that. And Noodles Mark has only done, they're only moving the queen. They're only moving the queen. So they need to get these other pieces out. That's going to help them fight for more squares on the board, right? The other thing about the queen is it's a high value piece. So if I ever attack it with one of these guys, it has to move, or you're going to just make a bad trade, right? So, okay, what's the queen doing? Let's find out. This is already defended. My bishop is under attack. So what do you guys think I should do? I think there's two moves here that look pretty good for me. What do you think I should play? Well, the one that comes to mind first is queen to d2. And the reason is because then I could continue castling, and I also get my queen kind of involved to defend. The other move would be just to retreat the bishop where it's going to be very well supported. Okay, so they both look pretty good, but I think queen d2 is probably a little bit better because I do want to castle quickly, and then it brings the other rook into the game also. And so this is just a super nice way to do that, defend and get ready to castle. Remember, if you can ever do multiple things at the same time, that's usually a good thing, right? Like I'm getting ready to castle and I'm defending the bishop. That's good, right? All right, so let's see what black is going to do. It's very difficult for them to find something to do with the queen now because all of our pieces are defended, right? Everything is defended. What are they going to attack, right? And I think that's the problem that they're having now. Now, I want to ask you guys a question. Should I take this pawn? What do you think? Well, the answer is I could, and it's probably a fine move. I don't see any, danger with that. But I could also castle. And I'm going to choose to go ahead and value castling and getting my king to safety more important rather than going pawn hunting. Now, there was probably another move here that I could have played, and well, now I'm going to get a chance to do it, that maybe was even better. But I'm just illustrating that, at this level, if you just follow these principles, you're going to get into a great position every single time. Like, you don't have to go for these fancy tactics and stuff. Just keep it simple. You're going to be doing great. All right. So now we've pretty much completed all of our development. We've castled. Now it's time to start looking for ways to attack. So what do you guys think? There's a move that's just jumping out at me as like an amazing move. What do you think it is? All right. Well, hopefully you said knight to d5. And knight to d5 is an attack on the queen, but it's also threatening a fork. And this was the move I was saying I probably should have done this before castling even. But I wanted to just illustrate, like, it's totally fine to just, follow the principles. But this is a great move because black probably wants to save the queen. But then I'm going to jump in here with the fork and get the rook and the king forked, right? So, and they can't stop me because the bishop is also defending, okay? There's also a very advanced tactic here, and I'm going to give you guys a chance to pause. Yes, this is a good move, but totally fine. But there's a more advanced tactic. Something to do with taking advantage of the queen and the king, if you want to look for that one. All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, hopefully maybe you found the move is bishop to b5. This is one that I've seen before, and it's a pin on the queen. But you say, Nelson, but our bishop's undefended. Black's just going to take it, which they do. But remember that fork that we had before? Now it's even better because instead of just the king and the rook, guess what? We've got a queen too. Okay, and that's because the bishop kind of lured the queen to that square. So it's a very advanced tactic, but we are going to be able to win the queen. Okay, and I'll go ahead and take that. So don't feel bad if you didn't see that. You would have been in a great position if you just noticed this one and did that. That's totally fine as well. But I just wanted to point out that that was there. Okay, so we're definitely ahead, but what do we do now? Well, I usually like to think about the weakest part of my opponent's position, which I think is their king. Their king is in the center. They can't castle because they've moved it. So how do we attack the king? And what's one of the best pieces that can attack the king? The queen, right? Queens are very, very good at checkmating the king. So what I'm looking for are ways to get my queen involved to attack this. So I think what I'm going to do is go queen to c3, threatening a simple checkmate, okay? And they could have maybe played knight c6 to try to block us. I was going to chase it away in that situation. But bishop to d7 doesn't really stop my queen from coming in. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and continue with the plan. Here we go. Let's get the queen as close as we can to the king. Make sure it's defended. It's not going to get captured. And now I'm going to start looking for checkmates. And I can't go there because the bishop would take me. I can't take this. I can't go here because I don't have it defended. I do have a check. Problem is I would lose my knight. Now that would open up the e file, which looks pretty good. Or what I'm going to do instead, which I think is a better move, is I'm going to slide my rook over here. Now, why am I doing this? Why am I sliding the rook over? Does anybody see why? Well, it has to do with the way pawns work. So pawns move forward, but they capture diagonally, right? They capture this way. Well, because my rook is here, can this pawn capture? The answer is no, because if you try to capture, you're going to put your king into check. What does that mean? It means the pawn is no longer defending this square. Why do we care? Because my knight, which is sitting over here, is ready to go deliver to checkmate. Okay? So good game to our opponent. That's kind of like a smothered checkmate. It's not totally a smothered checkmate because the king had a place, but it's basically smothered when your king is surrounded by all these different pieces. Okay? So, got some points there. Let's go ahead and jump into another game. And let me update the statistics over here. I'm going to probably forget about this at some point, but I'll try not to. We got our first win, and we're up to 371. Let's play a new game. Okay, I'm not even going to try to pronounce our opponent's name, but let's see. So against e4, we're just going to play e5. This is a really simple strategy to always just mirror your opponent's pawn. You can't really go wrong with that. You want to get some control over the center, and that's like one of the best ways to do it. I usually like to start by developing my knights instead of my bishops. Okay, knights before bishops is kind of a general principle, so we'll go ahead and just start out by doing that. And now let's think about our bishops. So I could play d6 to get this bishop out, but there's a bit of a problem, and the problem is that I'm blocking this guy in behind the pawn chain. Don't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do instead is get the bishop out first, and then we'll put the pawn up and get this guy out. Now, why did I choose here instead of here? Doesn't really matter. Both are different. Both are good. This puts pressure on this area of the board, on the weak f7 pawn. This puts pressure on the knight and the pin and helps support these. They're both totally fine. It's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and castle. Getting the king out of the center. Usually before move 10, if you can castle, that's kind of the general rule. Okay? And then I'll finish off the development by getting this bishop out. And of course, I'm scanning if my opponent makes any huge blunders, right? Like if they, move their knight somewhere where I could just take it or something like that, I would pause what I'm doing. But since they're not doing that, I'm just going to continue developing. Now, d6 or d5. Both moves are good and both are different. d6 is a little bit more passive if I want to just kind of defend and not really cause too much tension. d5 is if I want a little bit more action in the center. I have to make sure that I have enough pieces defending, which I do. So I'm okay with that. My king is safe. White's king is still in the center. That's usually a sign that breaking open the center is going to be fine. As long as your king's not there, you're probably okay to do this. Okay, so let's go ahead and recapture. We do have it defended, which is important. And we'll just retake the knight. Okay? And I'm feeling pretty good about the opening. I have one more piece that I still would like to develop, and that's probably what I'm going to do next. Okay, and our opponent does castle, which I think is a good move. Gets their king out of the center before anything happens along the e-file. All right, so where do we want to develop the bishop to? Bishops are tricky because usually you have 4 options. A lot of times you'll have 4 options, and it's not always clear which one to do. d7 to me seems too passive. It's like, what's my bishop doing there? I don't really need it doing anything here, so I'm going to go ahead and eliminate that one. e6 looks pretty good. I think that's a nice square. It's sort of controlling both sides of the board. I definitely think e6 makes sense. f5 normally is a pretty good square, but in this position, it's kind of like hitting this pawn, which I'm not sure how well that's going to do. Now, I could follow up with e4, in which case, if there's a trade here, then this becomes more likely. And then bishop to g4, a lot of times when I go there, it's to pin the knight. In this case, it's not really a pin because he already has the bishop here, which is lined up. So I think I'm going to eliminate that as an option. So that leaves me with these two. And I don't think it really matters too much. I think I'll just choose this one because I do like the idea of playing e4 and kind of opening up. Okay, c4. So the thing about pawn moves is pawns can never go backwards. So whenever they move forward, they change the position somehow. And there's long-term weaknesses that you can take advantage of. So this pawn on d3 is what we would call a backward pawn. Okay, a backward pawn is a pawn that has no pawns that can support it, either this way or are side by side to help it push forward. Okay, all the pawns have been pushed forward or are gone. So this e-pawn is gone, and this one now has been pushed all the way forward. This is a backward pawn. We have it blockaded, and it's a very easy target. Okay, and now my bishop f5 move looks like a great idea, right? Because it's just lined up on that pawn. I didn't know why it was going to do this, but like I said, I had already planned on e4. So Of course, I'm going to save my queen, and I think I'm going to leave it lined up here because I want to keep the pressure on the pawn. So d6 or d7 or d8. Now, I'm going to eliminate going to d8 right away. I'm not going there. Can somebody tell me why? Why am I not going to d8? Well, the answer is I want my rook to go to d8. Okay, usually you want to move your queen off of the back so your rooks are connected, and then they can slide to the center files. So I'm not going to take that away from my rook, which means I have these two options. They both look pretty good. It kind of looks like it depends on which bishop I would rather have defended. Okay, that's the difference in my mind. Don't really know if it matters. I'm noticing one thing with this bishop here, like if b4 happens and I try to go back, maybe my bishop could get trapped. Now I can also just jump in here, so I don't think that's a big deal. But maybe queen to d7 would give this bishop some more options. So I'm kind of overthinking it a little bit. So I'll just move to d7. I really don't think it matters. I think both of these would have been great. So this is the backward pawn. Okay, this is a long-term target, right? Because unless I allow it to move forward, it's never going away. Okay, and that's why we, if you hear isolated pawns, doubled pawns, backward pawns, that's why we care about them so much, because they're kind of permanent weaknesses unless I allow something to change. Okay, so let's check quickly what's going on here. Am I worried about that? No, this is offended, this is offended. I don't really care. What about the pawn? Let's see, 1, 2. Okay, so should I take the pawn? Well, the answer is maybe. And this is a tricky moment because I think a lot of people would just immediately think, all right, it's 2 against 1, I should take it, it's a free pawn. The issue, well, maybe you guys can tell me, what's the issue if I take this? There's a move that I'm concerned about. Well, the move is rook to d1, because rook to d1 would pin my bishop to my queen and also add an attacker. And then white's getting ready to take my bishop. Now, it's a little tricky because it looks like I have e4 that I could play, which attacks the knight and defends. And then the knight could go back and attack me again. It's still pinned, and it's still kind of tricky. And so because of that, I think I'm just going to wait a little bit. Like, the pawn's not really going anywhere, so I think I'm just going to wait and jump this rook over to the d file. Just add some more support there, okay? But you have to watch out, jumping into those pins because you can get into trouble. Okay, so my instinct is telling me, like, wait a second, the knight is just free for the taking. But wait a second, what's happening with the queen? So let's think about that. Am I concerned if the queen takes my queen? Well, no, I'll just take it back. It's just a trade, right? So this is good for me. I lost a pawn, but I'm getting a knight. Very good trade. I'll go ahead and capture that. And if you don't know, pawns are 1 point. Knights and bishops are 3 points. Rooks are 5. Queens are 9. Okay, so you always want to think about that when you're making trades. So if white would have thought about that before taking here, maybe they wouldn't have done this, right? Thinking, losing 3, getting 1. Okay, always have to scan. Do you have any pieces that can take, the big pieces? I do. I'm going to take the queen. So an oversight there by our opponent. They guess they forgot about the bishop there and lost the queen. And by the way, guys, this is what's going to happen 99% of the time at this rating range. You might have a nice plan of like, all right, I'm going to attack the backward pawn here. We're going to build up on it, and we're going to do some stuff to win a pawn. But then something like this happens. It's like, oh, well, I just got a free knight. Okay. Oh, they blundered the queen. It's more important that you pay attention to those big mistakes and don't worry so much about these plans. Like, yeah, it's okay to have a plan, and that's great. But at 300, 400, 500, 600 ELO level, just look for those big blunders. That's going to be how you win like 99% of the games. Okay. Should I trade the bishop? Yeah, I'm ahead. If you're ahead material, if you have extra pieces than your opponent, trading is good because it makes the game simpler, easier, gets you closer to the end game, which you're happy about. Now, this is a tricky moment. Whenever a pawn changes files, sometimes it can unleash things. And if you're not paying attention, maybe you would forget about the bishop and you could lose your bishop. Now, in this case, I'm not worried because it is defended, but I just want you to be aware of those kind of things. Okay, so what should I do? Going back to that pawn, I'm comfortable taking it now because I have so many pieces defending it. Even if a rook goes here and pins me, I would just move my queen out of the way and I still have it defended with my rook and my knight. And I get out of the pin, yeah, that's what we see. Okay? There's also something that you can do when you're way ahead in material is sometimes you can make trades that you wouldn't normally make because it helps you simplify the game. Okay? So normally I wouldn't want to give up this by allowing the queen and then taking here. I mean, I'm going to get a bishop and a rook for a queen, which if you do the math, I'm losing 9 points. I'm getting 8 points. So it's just a slightly bad trade for me. Normally, I wouldn't do that. But in this position, remember, our opponent blundered their queen. So I'm way, way ahead. So sometimes when you're way, way ahead, a practical thing to do is make a trade like this where it's like, yeah, it's not really the best trade. I'm going to lose my queen. But what does it do? It simplifies the position. We're getting close to the end game after this happens, and white's only going to have a rook and some pawns left. So even though the trade was suboptimal, because it helps me get closer to the end game, I'm going to do it. Okay? And well, I was expecting this. We didn't see it, so I'll just keep taking the pieces, but you understand the idea, right? Okay, and so let's go ahead. We'll take that, bring the queen in, and now I'm starting to look for checkmates. I have so many pieces. I have a queen close to the king. That's usually a good signal of like, look for checkmates. And I don't see any right away. There's a lot of squares that the king can run to. We have some of them cut off. But this one, I'm having a hard time figuring out a way to control that. And so whenever you find yourself in a situation like that, it usually means you need more pieces. Just bring in more pieces. So I'm going to bring in another piece. Bring the rook in. And I'm going to keep looking for checkmates. And once you have enough pieces, you'll probably be able to see one. Okay, so the king's going to move here. And then I do see a checkmate if you guys want to look. Where's the checkmate in this position? All right, if you had a chance to look at that. So we've got the escape route back here cut off by the rook. We just kind of need to control a lot of these squares up here. So how do we do that? We'll bring the queen close to the king, and it's defended by the knight, and there's the checkmate. Okay? So very nice. And I haven't been showing the game review. I guess we can look at that. If you guys want to see the accuracy, I'll just pop it up real quick, and so you can take a look at that. Okay, so pretty nice game there. Our opponent played pretty well for 300. That's not a bad accuracy, so props to them. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into another game, and I will, oops, wrong one there, sorry. I will go ahead and update this. You hear screaming in the background. My 1.5-year-old is screaming about something, so I apologize for that. All right, close this, and let's go into a new game. All right, here we go. So d4, again, I'm going to just mirror the pawn, right? They put a pawn forward, I put a pawn forward. You can't really go wrong with that strategy. They're going to develop a knight. I'm going to develop a knight. Now, one thing about d4 openings is that a lot of times moving the c pawn forward is a good plan, okay? And so a lot of beginners will play knight to c6. They block their c pawn. They can't move it forward. It's not usually a good strategy. Why do we want our c pawn to move forward in the queen pawn openings? Well, for one, it puts pressure on the d4 square. I'm sorry, my 1.5-year-old is screaming his head off right now. It's very distracting. The reason we want, I don't know if you can hear it through the mic or not. The reason we go here is because we want to put pressure on the d pawn, and it's hard to do that with the e pawn, right? We just lose a pawn. This one, you might say, well, don't we still lose a pawn? This one's very easy to recapture, okay, because our bishop is sitting here waiting. We can also go queen check and take it right away if we want. So we're not so much worried about losing this pawn. Okay, that's the idea. And now we go with the knight after the pawn is up there. Also, the queen can come out here. Another reason why the c pawn moving forward is good for us. Okay, so that's the idea. Let's see how white's going to respond to this. They're going for this fianchetto setup here, which is a pretty solid setup, and they're defending. So yeah, white's doing a pretty nice job here. And what I'm going to do is continue developing. But before I get this bishop out, I need to move the pawn. Should I move the pawn right away? I could, but then my bishop's going to be stuck. So I think what I'll do instead is bring it out. Okay, and again, I have two diagonals that both look pretty good. Really, you could go to either of these. I'm just going to go to f5 for now, but g4 I think also made some sense as well. But this one looks pretty nice. It's an open diagonal there. Looks like my bishop's getting control of a lot of squares. We're going to go ahead and do that. And now I can play e6, get this guy out. Yep, and let's go ahead, e6. He's ready to go, and we're getting all of our pieces into the game. Okay, so there's a couple of ways we could do this. I think you can either trade this pawn if you want. You can leave it. Sometimes you can push, but usually I don't like to push because then if e4 ever happens and I have to take, my pawn is kind of weak. That's something you have to watch out for. So I think what I'm going to do is just develop my bishop. Yes, if they take me, I will just have to recapture and I'll lose a move, but that's okay. I would rather just leave the tension for right now. And so we will go with bishop to d6. And I think our opponent's done a really nice job, by the way, of creating a very solid setup. They haven't really done anything wrong. c4, interesting. So now we have to kind of be careful because there's lots of potential captures. This is actually a pretty complicated position. So what I like to do in situations like this is, first of all, make sure I'm not in any immediate danger from like a capture on one of my pawns. So for example, if white takes me here, I recapture, am I in trouble? I don't think so. I think that's okay. All right. If they take me here and I recapture, am I in trouble? I don't think so. It looks okay, right? So I'm not worried about any immediate dangers from that. Now, the next question is, what if I take? Do I have any like really good, like if I take this, they take me, oh, I could win a piece there. Okay, so maybe I'm getting a free pawn if I take that. But if I take here, it looks like the knight's going to jump in. It doesn't really look very good. Okay. Or I could just leave it alone and I could castle. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think I want a free pawn. Why not? It seems like a free pawn is good. Even if I lose that pawn later, it's just a trade, but temporarily it is free, and maybe I could hold on to it and actually just have a pawn. Is my king going to get into trouble leaving it in the center of the board? Maybe, but it's pretty blocked off position. I don't really think so. So I think I can safely take this guy. Okay, so that's kind of what you want to think about. I think castling would have been a totally fine move too. We didn't have to take that. You can't really go wrong getting your king to safety. Like that's always going to be a pretty nice move. Okay, so he takes us, and so we have two options. 1, 2. Which way do you guys think I should recapture? One of them makes a lot more sense to me than the other. Well, if you had a chance to look at that, I think I should take with the knight. Because if I take with a pawn, I'm giving myself double isolated pawns. So isolated pawns have no pawns on the adjacent files, right? So there would be no pawns here or here if I did that. Okay. And then they're doubled. So there are 2 pawns on the same file, extremely weak, extremely easy, and they can't help each other. They can't support each other. So because of that, I'm going to take with the knight instead. Keeps my pawns nice and pretty. I can always push this guy forward if I need to support him. I could create pawn chains like this if I wanted to, where everybody is helping everybody else. Okay, so this looks like a good move by our opponent. It looks like, uh-oh, we just got forked. How did I miss this? How did I miss this fork? What do you guys think? Well, it's a trick question. I didn't miss it. And the reason I didn't miss it is because of a special move in chess called en passant. En passant is when pawns are side by side, like this. When one of the pawns moved 2 spaces from the last move, like this, I now have the option to take it. And if you imagine if the pawn had only moved 1 space, I could have taken it, right? But it didn't. It moved 2 spaces. But en passant says, well, you can still take it. That's the special move. That's the special rule, right? It's to prevent pawns from jumping past a pawn that you have advanced, okay? So that's why it's not a fork, because I can just take the pawn. If I couldn't do that, then yeah, I would have just made a pretty big mistake. But since I can, I'm going to just en passant, okay? So there we go. I'm getting the learn about this move pop up now, but I know about that one. So I think our opponent, didn't see that. They thought they had a fork, but yeah, you don't want to forget about the en passant, okay? All right, so let's see what their threat is, right? The knight's attacking my bishop. Well, I do have it defended, so that would just be a trade, so that's not a huge issue. They're also attacking the pawn. Let's see, they're attacking the pawn 3 times. I'm only defending it 1 time. Okay, so that's probably the biggest threat. They also unleashed their queen. You always want to pay attention to the long-range pieces that get unleashed when something moves, right? But do I care? Well, no, I have it defended with my pawn. So biggest threat seems to be this pawn, so maybe I could just simply trade. That seems like a pretty good idea. And like I said, if they take here, I'll just take back. I think that seems great. So let's go ahead and do that. And we get the bonus that it's with check, so they can't actually do something else. They have to. Okay. So whenever I see big pieces like this on the same diagonal or the same file, I always want to look for tactics. And which piece of mine do you think could potentially take advantage of this? Probably my bishop, for two reasons. Number one, the bishop is on the same colors, okay? But also it's a lower value piece. So if I play a move like bishop c5, I'm pinning that, and maybe I'm going to be able to take it. Now, maybe white wants to block, but it looks like I've got that controlled. So I think this is a very powerful move, okay? And that's how I thought about it. I was like, wait a second, the king's getting open up here. Now there's two pieces on the same diagonal. Do I have any? Oh, I do have the bishop. That's my thought process. That's how I'm noticing these moves, okay? All right, so let's see. Does our opponent threaten anything by going here? Well, they're attacking this, but it's defended. They're attacking this, but it's defended. Okay, they unleash their bishop, but it's defended. So everything is defended. I think we're okay. And you might say, Nelson, it's move 13. You haven't castled yet. What are you doing? It's important to understand that I've been reacting to some very serious threats by my opponent, and sometimes that's more important than castling, right? So yes, try to castle early, but you know, if you're reacting to threats, that's okay too. So I could take, it's defended, that's fine. I think I'm going to go ahead and trade this. Just why not? It's with a check. I can easily throw that move in there, make the trade happen. Okay. And now let's see, I'm scanning, I'm looking for like queen coming over here, queen coming here, trying to take advantage of the king's position. I could trade. Yeah, I think maybe I will go ahead and trade since I'm ahead some material now. Remember what we said? Trading is good. So let's go ahead and do that. Simplify the position a little bit. And okay, now might be a good time to get my king to safety. I think I can't go wrong by playing a move like that. But I'm also looking for these checks because this could be pretty powerful as well. So do I want to throw in the check first while I can and then castle? What about bishop to e3? Well, we've got the knight. We'll just take it. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So you could definitely make an argument for that. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to go ahead and castle, get my king out of the center, and immediately bishop to g5. Okay. Oh, is anything defending the bishop? I don't think so. So that looks like a free piece. So I think I'm just going to take that. And okay. Now what am I looking for? Well, what's the biggest weakness in the position for my opponent? It's probably the king. You could say it's the king. You could say it's the fact that they're down material. So if I'm taking advantage of the fact that they're down material, I'm going to try to trade. If I'm taking advantage of the king placement, I'm going to look for ways to attack the king like this. It's a check. It's also a fork. I'm attacking the knight. I'm attacking the king. I'm scanning for other moves, and it just looks like a free piece looks really great for me. So I'm going to go ahead and take that. And since I'm down to a minute and a half, I do want to speed up a little bit, but also just continue to look for good moves. Okay, you don't want to panic and start playing bad moves just because you're trying to play quickly. So let me go ahead, take here. And you could say, well, why don't you trade queens? I could have, but I'm trying to checkmate the king here. And so that's why I'm going to leave the queens on the board. All right, so let me go ahead and bring in some more troops. Let's go rook to e8, get this guy involved. Let me go ahead and let's see. I think what I'm going to do is play bishop to e4, just defend here. This guy is super powerful. You can't really touch that if you're white. Okay, you could do that, but that's a free queen, so I'll take it. And now we're just looking for checkmate. Yeah, and white is kind of falling apart here, trying to play quickly. I'll just go ahead and take the rook, and then now we'll just get a simple checkmate. So when you have queens and rooks on the king, the easiest thing to do is kind of like a ladder checkmate, where you basically control one file and then you control the other file. Okay, so I don't want the king to escape, so I'm going to start by controlling that one. Okay, now that I've got the king cut off, I can finish off by bringing in the rook on the final one. Okay, so that's one of the simple and easy ways. If you have like a queen and a rook or two rooks or something, you can very easily do that. Okay, there we go. All right, we'll check the game review very quickly here. I think we played pretty well. And yeah, 97 accuracy. Can't really complain about that. And let me go ahead and we will play one more game. Let me update the wins here. So 3 wins so far. And all right, let's jump into one more game, guys, for this first episode here. We're about to reach 400. Yeah, this game will put us over 400. Okay, so let's play a different opening. Let's play a d4 opening. We're going to play the Colle system. This is a very solid setup. You could use this at a lot of different rating levels, but we're going to play it here. In the Colle system, you play d4, You bring out your knight. And we're going to actually put our pawn on e3. Now, e3 actually breaks the principle. Well, the other move in the Colle that you play normally is c3. And c3 is the move that I would play anyway. Now, why would I play c3 anyway? When somebody puts you in check like this, if you can attack it with a pawn and block the check at the same time, you are gaining a tempo because they now have to spend a move moving their bishop away. Otherwise, you're just going to take it. It's just not going to be good for them, right? So they wasted a move. They have to spend 2 moves with the same piece, and you kind of got this move for free, essentially. Okay, so very, very happy about that. Now I'm going to play the move e3. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm showing you what the Colle is. Normally, I would probably play the move e4. I think e4 is probably the best move, just getting both pawns in the center. But I want to show you what the Colle is. The Colle, you would go like this, because a lot of times black's going to have a pawn or a knight here, and you're not going to be able to do that. So that's why I'm showing you this. Okay, this is the Colle. And we're breaking a principle of like, wait a second, Nelson, you blocked your bishop in. What are you doing? The reason you do that in the Colle is, number one, it guards here, so you don't have to worry about any shenanigans with the queen, which sometimes happens if people are trying to be tricky, okay? And also, our plan is not to forget about this guy. We're going to develop him later. We just want to set up our other pieces first, castle, play e4, and then this guy jumps into the game, okay? And usually when they take you, you're going to recapture this way. And again, it has to do with the bishop. We're not forgetting about him. So now we have an opportunity to let him into the game like this. So this is another option. If we didn't get this trade, we would have eventually played e4, and that's how he would have gotten out, okay? So very solid position. You don't have any weaknesses. It's hard for your opponent to really attack you when you play the Colle. And so very, very good opening at the beginner, intermediate level. Although I've been experimenting with it recently at the higher level, and it's still pretty good to play, okay? We're going to go ahead and castle, get the king out of the center. It's before move 10, so that's great. And I'm thinking of a couple things. Number one, I'm thinking of rook to e1. It's a half-open file. Half-open files are files that only have one color pawn on them. So we only have a black pawn, so it's a half-open file. And so that makes my rook pretty effective. I'm also thinking about developing this guy and developing this guy. And looking for weaknesses that my opponent, might have. So I want to ask you guys maybe a more advanced question, but do you see any weaknesses that were created by this move that they just played? Well, the answer is yes. And you might say, well, they created weaknesses along the light squares, which is true, but I don't really have a way to take advantage of that. They're going to put their bishop there, and it looks like they're pretty solid there. They've also taken away something that this bishop had. This bishop no longer has a place to retreat. So how do I take advantage of that? Well, the answer is b4, and the bishop's actually trapped. And we're going to just take it next move, and unless they want to take us, but then we've also got that defended. So you can see how I kind of just paid attention. Every time your opponent makes a move, you want to just like, okay, what's going on? Did they create any weaknesses? Are there any drawbacks to that move? And then if you find one, the follow-up question is, all right, how do I take advantage of that? And that's what I did here, and I won myself a piece for 2 pawns, okay? So again, I'm kind of scanning. Do I have any tricks? Do I have any tactics? The knight's undefended, but I don't really have any way to take advantage of that. Almost have a fork, but not quite because the pawn's blocking. Do I care about this? Maybe, but I think I would rather just get some more pieces developed since it's defended. So I'm not super concerned with that. I'm just going to bring my knight out. But I could have moved it if I wanted to save the bishop. That would have been an okay move. I tend to prioritize developing my pieces, though, early in the game. And I'm okay with the trade, especially since I'm ahead in the material. We already got the bishop. Trading is good. Okay? So here we go. And the bishop is lined up here. Am I concerned? Not really. I'll just take it with the queen. I'm pretty happy with that. All right. I think I want to bring this bishop out. Question is where? We have a lot of options now this time because we could go this way or we could go this way. So let's just go one at a time. We're not going here. We're losing a bishop for free. All right. Here we're gaining a tempo on the queen. Seems pretty good. F4 seems really good. That's a super nice diagonal. I definitely could like that. So good, good. E3, not so much. It's stuck behind the pawn. It blocks the queen from supporting my knight, which I talked about. So I'm not going to go there. We can eliminate that, these two look pretty good. D2 looks good, but it seems too passive. I have more better options, so I don't want to go there. B2, same thing. It's okay, but it's not very active. It's passive. What about A3, though? This one looks really good to me. And it's really a toss-up in my mind now of here, here, or here. All of these look good for different reasons. I'm thinking G5, I might have to just waste some time after F6 running away with my bishop. So I think I'm going to eliminate that one. And I think it's a question now of these two. So let's talk about the differences. One thing, this is much more natural. This is where a bishop would normally sit, right? And that just makes a lot of sense. Very, very good. This one, however, stops my opponent from castling. So if they try to play a move like knight F6 and castle their king, they can't do it. Okay, you're not allowed to castle if your king passes through a check. So whenever you castle, you want to think of it as the king is moving 1, 2. Okay, that's what castling essentially is. The king actually moves 2 times, and then the rook jumps over. So if black's king tries to move 2 times, notice it passes into the check. So that's why I'm going to go bishop to A3. This is very, very annoying, especially when you want to try to attack your opponent's king. If you ever have an opportunity to stop them from castling, like I do here, that's usually pretty good. And also the fact that it's just a nice diagonal for the bishop. I mean, I'm just controlling lots of squares too. It's not like it's a bad move. It's a good move and stops the castling. So now I know, okay, this is where the king is going to be. Now I can attack it. Now, how do we attack the king? I want you to pause for a moment and think about what are the weak squares around the king that we might be able to easily take advantage of. All right, well, hopefully you said D6. Okay, because D6 looks like a very weak square. There's no pawns that can control it. That's kind of the key, right? Because I don't want to be moving my pieces places where pawns can take them. For example, if I put a knight there, it would just get captured. If I put a knight there, it would just get captured. If I put a knight there, it would just get captured. But here, nothing's going to capture me. And it's going to be a fork. And so what move do you think I'm looking at? Knight to B5, right? Look at this square, look at this bishop, look at this king, the rook. It's just, that's it, right? Now, I could have also played like D5, trying to open up the E file. That would have been good too, but this just looks amazing. So here we go. We're going to jump in with the check. It's also a triple fork. And even better is it's forcing the king to walk in line with this guy. Okay, this is called a discovered check. So it's a discovered check because it's not a check with this piece. Well, it could be, but it doesn't have to be. It's going to be a check with the bishop, essentially, which is very, very powerful, okay? Because I'm allowed to do some things that I normally wouldn't be able to do. For example, if I wanted to, I'm not going to do this. Actually, maybe I am going to do this, now that I think about it. There's so many good moves, I'm having a hard time here. So here's the thing. If I wanted to move my knight here, normally, I'm going to just lose it to the pawn. The pawn's just going to take my knight, right? But in this case, my bishop would be putting the king in check. So the pawn can't do that. He has to get out of check. So that's why it's so powerful, these discovered checks. Now, that's also what's called a double check. So it's a discovered double check. So it's lots of stuff's going on here. And I see a checkmate pattern that I've seen before if the king goes back. So if you guys want to pause, after knight to F5, if the king moves backwards, what move do you think I would play next? If you had a chance to look at that, the answer is knight takes G7, and that's actually going to be checkmate, because remember, the bishop is sitting over here slicing across this way, and the knight would be delivering checkmate. Really nice checkmate pattern. Now, it's tempting to also just take the bishop, because that's a free bishop, it's check, and then I could take the queen. But checkmate is better than a queen, right? Now, there's one move that black could play instead that I'm concerned about, though. What do you think the move is? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is king to F6, because if he runs out here with the king, I no longer have the checkmate that I mentioned earlier. There might still be some checkmate if my queen can come over. I'm just not totally sure. Actually, yeah, I think there would be now that I'm looking at it. But that was my concern, okay? So either way, both moves are really, really good. I'm going to go with this one. I'm suspecting our opponent's probably going to go back and we'll get the checkmate. But if they do come out, then I'm going to transition my focus and start using my queen by probably going here and trying to get the queen close to the king to deliver the checkmate. Okay, but look how powerful this is. It's a double check. You can't take my knight. You can't even block this bishop if you wanted to because you're in check with the knight also. You have to move the king. Whenever you have a double check, the only way to get out of it is to move the king. All right. So black only has this option and this option. They go here. Okay. Oh, they do. They play the best move. Okay, good. Good. So they avoid the checkmate. If they would have went back, we would have had a checkmate here. So now the question is, what can I do? Of course, my knight's under attack now. If I want, I could save that. But I think instead, I'm going to try to get my queen to a better location. And right now, it just doesn't really have any good ways to attack the king. I can't really do anything along these light squares. I really want it to go to either e5 or g5, which would be a checkmate, depending on what black did next. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to go here. And yes, I might lose my knight in the process. That's okay, because I've got my eyes set on a checkmate here. Okay, so we'll see what they're going to do. And they do take it. Okay, and so let's analyze a little bit here. We have queen e5. King moves over. Not quite checkmate. We have queen g5. King moves over. Not quite checkmate yet. But I think very soon when the rook gets involved, we would have a checkmate. I think that's what I'm going to do. Queen to g5. And notice I'm kind of looking at like how are all the pieces fitting together to help me attack the king. And I noticed that by forcing the king this way onto the open file, it allows my rooks to join the party, which are very powerful pieces. And I think that's what we need for the checkmate. So here we go. Rook to e1. And black does have one move. Actually, two moves. They could block with the bishop or they could keep running this way. But if they run this way, again, it looks like my queen is coming over, probably going to force the king this way where the other rook can attack, and we're just going to keep, yeah, they go for this one instead. So this is where there's a book I'm going to recommend for you guys, 1001 Brilliant Ways to Checkmate. And it's like tactical positions like this where you fill your brain with them. So when you get in a position like this, you're like, oh, I know what the best move is. You know, I've seen this one before. So if you want to pause, there's a checkmate here for white. Or at least it's going to lead to a checkmate, I should say. So, okay, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook takes e4. And I'm trying to lure the pawn away because I want my queen to go to e5. This is a pattern that I've seen many, many times. When the queen goes next to the king and there's two pawns, knight moves away, I instantly know it's checkmate. So that's why, going back in this position, I knew that if I just take this, he can't take me or the game is over. The only thing he could have done would be to try to run this way and the game would have kept going. But I've seen this many, many times. And so here we go. There's the checkmate. Okay, so 1001 Brilliant Ways to Checkmate. If you get that book, you'll start to see lots of these patterns. And then when you play in a game, you're like, I've seen that one before. That's how I knew that. So game review very, very quickly here. Thank you guys for watching these games with me. 78, that was a tricky game. Didn't play it totally perfect, but we did have the brilliant move there. Let me know in the comments, what do you guys think about this? How do we make this rating climb better? Let me jump up the wins here to 4. Big thank you to chess.com for giving me this account, Average Joe. We're 402. We're going to keep climbing. We're going to go all the way to 2,200. And I'll see you guys real soon. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.